Hello and welcome everyone. My name is KashMuney and welcome to my building tips for small spaces video. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through 5 tips for building and decorating in small spaces, along with some examples. Okay, so I guess before we get started, let's talk about some of the differences between normal spaces and small spaces. So with large spaces, normally you have too much space and not enough to do with it. So because you have too much space, you have to do something to fill that, whether it's adding some sort of furniture, some sort of center decoration, adding more chests. You just have to add something to make it look good and make it look not so empty. If we want a quick example, we can look at the lighthouse I made. So on the inside, we have a lot of space and I had to fill it somehow. I decided to go with like a kitchen, some tables, a nice little bed area over there, but even then, there's still a lot of open space that I wasn't sure what to do with, so I left it empty. Small interiors, on the other hand, have the opposite problem. You have a lot you want to fit into the space, but not a lot of room to do it, so you have to prioritize and be efficient with what you place in there. So hopefully that was a good introduction into why decorating small spaces is so hard. Let's get started with the tips. Tip number 1 is to use detailed blocks. We are starting in the wizard tower, and as you can see, every block I've selected has a lot of detail. All the blocks here are interesting to look at and add their own detail to the interior. So let's look at some blocks that have a lot of detail. First, we can look at some that don't. So you might use planks, any sort of stone, or concrete for your interiors just to act as fillers. And as I said in the introduction, that is not going to cut it. With small interiors, every block matters. So what are some blocks that have a lot of detail? Blocks that add a lot of detail are ones that have interesting shapes or designs, or have a certain structure that stands out. Really just something that makes them unique. So first we can look at copper. Any copper block works great. All of the copper blocks have something interesting about them. I mean, the trapdoor has, this little cross, a square in the middle, some air gaps, and each of these other copper blocks have something interesting and unique about them. Not to mention copper has 4 oxidation states. Next we move on to wood. So many wood products have such amazing designs and detail per square. The trapdoors are the most notable. They all have these interesting shapes, interesting colors. Some of them are transparent, some of them aren't. They just have a lot to offer and are something I use a ton when decorating small interiors. On another note, we have doors, gates, signs, buttons, and ladders. All of these have interesting properties. You might notice that the sign might not have an interesting design, but it has an interesting shape and structure. Same with a button. And then finally, we have some generally interesting blocks. Any sort of stone variation works great. Dead coral's great. And so is glazed terracotta, although the terracotta can be a bit overpowering sometimes. And then I find logs really good. Bookshelves have a ton of colors, ton of shapes. Those are great. And even barrels. These are more subtle, but they add a little pop of detail in your build. So if we go back to the wizard's tower, let's see some of this in action. So first of all, the floor is varied between the cracked stone bricks, the mossy, and the regular. Then we have the bookshelves. We have a little workspace with a candle, a pot maybe someone's working on, brewing stand, just little details here and there. And then we have like cobwebs, some signs. We're just cramming a lot of detail in one space. If this was a regular interior, this would probably feel like too much, but because this is a small interior, a lot of detail works. Making sure your small spaces have blocks with a lot of detail is going to make sure your small interiors look great. Tip number 2 is to use all the space you can. And the second tip comes from the mountain hut. As you can see, it's a pretty beat up mountain hut. Definitely has been here for a long while. Similar to the last tip, we don't have much space, so we have to make use of all of it. Whether that be vertical, on the walls, on the floor, make use of all the space. So let's take a look at this build as an example. This is an especially small build, so we have to fit a lot in here. First, we have barrels on the floor, a chest with the bed on top, and this is a great little hack. You can still access the chest, but you also save a little space right here. We have the furnace, which we made to look like a chimney, taking up some of the vertical space, and then some shelves, just as like storage, little survival pieces. And that is about all the space we have. When you're making your small interiors, ask yourself, are you using the floor, the ceiling, the walls? are you using all the space you have available to you? Little tricks like this are going to be what takes your small spaces to the next level. Tip number 3 is to make your interior larger. So while that seems kind of counterintuitive, because I mean, this is a building video for small spaces, let me show you an example. So we have these 2 wagons right here. They're about the same size, about 5 blocks long and 3 blocks steep, minus some of the extra bits. But anyway, if we go into this first wagon, it is very cramped. We have a bed, a furnace, crafting table, and a couple chests, but that's about it. Now if we go into this wagon, we have a lot more space, a lot more storage, a lot of extra decorations. This wagon just feels a lot more open. So while both these wagons are about the same size, how come one has a much bigger interior than the other? The trick is that this wagon uses full blocks as its outside decoration, while this wagon uses trapdoors. Trapdoors are an excellent way to make your interior bigger while keeping the exterior the same size. While you can be somewhat limited in what kind of blocks you can use for your outside, it allows for so much more space, and when you're making your starter base or making anything small, extra interior space is exactly what you need. Now I should note that the only 3 completely solid trapdoors are the spruce, the dark oak, and the birch. But with the rest of the trapdoors, you can see right through them. So while they may not make the best walls, they make good windows, as you can see right here, or shutters. So yeah, building in small spaces doesn't have to be super constricting. You can get a bit creative and expand your walls a little bit and get big spaces like this. Just don't use any wind charges around it, or you're going to mess up your entire build. My 4th tip is to use item frames sparingly. Personally, I'm not a big fan of item frames. I really don't like how they look, and I feel like it looks weird when you place a block in there. But I think they definitely have a use in a small space, and let me show you some of the examples where they work. Item frames look great when you want to have one item on display, something useful like a clock or a compass, something that shows, oh, the person living here uses this often and puts it in an important spot. If you put too many item frames in, you have this weird rectangle frame, and it just looks weird to have a bunch of items framed around your build. Another great use for item frames is maps. Maps are a really cool addition. They show the area you've created your build. They show where you've explored. If you want to get fancy, you could do pixel art, which looks amazing. But they add a nice pop of color that blocks and items don't really do in Minecraft. So yeah, this is a great addition. But again, you can definitely overdo your placement of item frames, so try and limit how many you use. In a space like this, I wouldn't use more than 2. Tip number 5 is to be intentional with your detail. In other words, ask yourself, why did I add this? We are back in the Wizard's Tower, and as you can see, we have a little potion brewing room. This room is focused around this cauldron filled with some sort of liquid, and all the other aspects of this room are built around this being a brewing room. For example, we have some spilled potion, some brewing ingredients scattered around the room, some candles for some light, a pot for some storage, and cobwebs to show that this place is very old. So when you're designing these small interiors, just ask yourself, why do I want to add a block? What blocks or items that I add to the whole story behind it? If you want to hear more about using a story to guide your builds, check out my last tips video. Anyways, we are at the end of the video. If you feel like you learned something or feel better at building in small spaces, let me know down in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, feel free to like and subscribe. Also, I'm trying out a bunch of new themes with my videos, so I'd really appreciate feedback if you had it. With that being said, thank you so much for watching, everyone. You giving your time to watch my videos means so much to me. It shows that you really enjoy my content, and I really appreciate that. And don't forget, have a great day.